Welcome back to The Race. I'm Chris Stewart, and this week's primaries gave us another possible first in Florida. In a win that's being described by many as shocking, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum secured the Democratic nomination for governor. Gillum came from behind in a crowded field of Democrats. He's arguably the most progressive, calling for a single-payer healthcare system and abolishing ICE in its current state. If his momentum continues and he defeats Republican Representative Ron DeSantis, he'll be Florida's first African-American governor. And as people in Arizona mourn Senator John McCain, they went to the polls to choose a successor to the state's other senator, Republican Jeff Flake, who's retiring. Representative Martha McSally claimed victory in the Republican primary. It was over former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio and Kelly Ward. She'll face the Democrat Congresswoman Kristen Sinema in November. By the way, Arizona's governor chooses who will succeed Senator McCain. Now, we're gearing up for the midterms here on The Race, but changes are already being made for the next presidential election. Newsy's Matt Picked with a look at what Democrats are doing differently to pick their next presidential candidate.
The Democratic National Committee has revamped what has been one of the most contentious parts of its presidential nominating process.
The idea that we had, in this case, 400 superdelegates pledged to a candidate some 8 months or more before the first ballot was cast is, to my mind, absurd.
Under the old rules, Democrats would divvy up the votes for their presidential nominee into two types of delegates. The bulk of the votes went to pledged delegates, people selected in state primaries or caucuses who are committed to vote the same way their state did. But a handful of the delegate seats, around 15 to 20%, were reserved for party officials, governors, and members of Congress. These so-called superdelegates were free to vote for whichever nominee they felt like, regardless of what their constituents wanted. During its summer meeting in Chicago, the DNC voted to strip superdelegates of their vote on the first presidential ballot entirely. They would still get to weigh in on the nomination if none of the candidates won the first round outright.
And nominate Hillary Clinton by acclamation as the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party.
Superdelegates became a major issue during the 2016 Democratic primary, when Hillary Clinton locked up support from a majority of them well before the primary voting was over. Her opponent, Bernie Sanders, argues superdelegates are a form of institutional bias against outsider candidates. Superdelegates have never swung a nomination against the primary voters, but detractors argue the system goes against the democratic principle that a party's voters should choose their candidates. Some party leaders have objected to being disenfranchised by the changes, and superdelegates that feel less than super about this might not be as eager to show up for the party's convention, which could weaken the party structure overall.
Thanks for joining us this week, and be sure to join us next week as we take a hard look at national security. How far have we come since 9/11? What are the true threats facing America today, and are we prepared to face them? We'll be getting into that next week, but for now we want to thank you for joining us from Northwest Arkansas. I'm Chris Stewart, and this is The Race.